Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to discuss what I believe are the best new settings for Season 8. So I already made a settings video about a week or two ago where I basically compared every setting and the differences between having a certain setting on versus off or on low versus epic. The point of this video though is to inform you guys of all the new settings that have been added this season, as well as some changes that were made to settings that were already in the game, and there's a lot. FYI, I'm still using my brother's setup and will probably be for the next video, but then I'll be back on my normal mic and computer. The first settings we're going to look at are the non-graphic settings that were changed, mainly because this is where the most changes were and because my other video focused mainly on graphic settings. I'll leave timestamps for each setting I cover on the screen now, as well as when I cover the graphic settings if you guys want to skip around or just want me to shut up. So let's dive into it, starting with my new favorite setting, auto pickup weapons. Auto pickup weapons is a setting that does pretty much exactly what it says. It automatically picks up weapons for you. Without auto pickup weapons on, you have to press your interact key, so mine is E, and it will add the weapon to my inventory. With auto pickup weapon on though, you still have the option to press your interact key and pick it up, but then it adds this amazing feature where you can just walk over guns and they'll be added to your inventory too. Up until this point, most of you have probably had it off, and even if you had it on, you probably thought it was useless because up until this point it has been. Starting in Season 7, I believe, Epic apparently broke auto pickup weapons on the first weapon that you see. To me, I think this was completely intentional, mainly because they tried to fix the setting so it would prevent people from gliding over weapons and picking them up without ever touching the ground, which sounds pretty insane and to me is a skill gap. Like, come on, look how sick that looks. But to Epic, they probably thought it was unfair and tried to prevent this from happening, but couldn't fix it, so they just completely disabled it working for your first weapon. This is just what I think happened. Obviously, I could be completely wrong, but up until that point, it worked completely well, and if we think back to double pump, instead of finding a way to balance double pump shotguns, they just added a clunky delay feature. That's just one of my Fortnite conspiracy theories, so obviously I have no idea if it's right or not. Anyways, so auto pickup weapons has been pretty useless because the reason it's so damn nice to have is for picking up the first weapon you land on or the one you get out of a chest. Finally, in Season 8 though, it's fixed, so let's weigh the pros and cons of having it on versus off. The main pro is that you can literally land on top of a gun off spawn, so instead of having to land near it and positioning yourself to press the interact key to get it, you just land right on top of it. I've had this clip saved for months when I was originally going to make a video on auto pickup, so you know that I gotta use it, come on. But as we see, Poach is the last person to drop for the gun and tilted. His opponents drop just short of the gun because they don't have auto pickup on and they had to position themselves to press E on it. But Poach, you know, like the alpha he is, lands right on top of it, gets the gun, and then kills everyone. That clip is pretty much all you need to see why everyone should have auto pickup weapons on. It also works for when guns are out of chests, so if you gamble someone for a chest and you position yourself correctly, I think weapons usually come out of the left side of chests. You can just scoop it up and kill them. It also works for consumables, even though it's called auto pickup weapons, and it works for traps and everything else. The only downside of that is, of course, while looting someone early game or after you kill someone, you might accidentally pick up something that you didn't want, so you'll just have to drop it or replace it with a different gun or consumable that you actually want. To me, this doesn't happen that much. Obviously early game it happens a lot, but it's just kind of a minor inconvenience for how useful auto pickup weapons is, especially if you love hot dropping and 50-50ing people for guns. In conclusion, if you want to be an alpha, turn it on. The next setting we'll look at is sprint by default, which when Season 8 first came out just didn't work. You would either not be able to sprint when you wanted to, or you would randomly stop, which is the opposite of what you want when you have the setting on. It was broken on both console and PC, but I know there were even more problems with it on console. They released a hotfix to patch it, so it's fixed by now. So even if you have it turned off or always had it off, I recommend having it on now. For PC, auto run is extremely useful because it frees up your shift keybind. I've talked about this before in like 2 of my other videos, but left shift is easily the most accessible keybind you have since you're already using it to hit sprint. On console, it's also pretty useful as you can bind something by pressing in your thumbstick now instead of having it to sprint. I've seen some good controller players rebind that to editing or something else, which is actually pretty smart to do. Just realize that for controllers this is different than auto run, so if you have sprint by default on with a controller, you don't need the auto run setting on. Even if you have sprint by default off, I would still turn the auto run feature off because It's just really clunky, and it was kind of random for when it would turn on in my experience when I was on controller. So I know most top controller players have auto run off and they have sprint by default on. Unlike auto pickup weapons though, sprint by default doesn't have any downsides. Some people argue that you need to be able to walk to be quiet in houses, but all you need to do is just crouch with sprint by default on, and it's pretty much the same thing. And you can't even tell me that walking is actually useful in this game. Just like, look how stupid I look. I don't think I've seen someone legitimately walk in games since it first came out, and people didn't even know how to move because they were switching to keyboard and mouse for the first time. So if you're smart and you decide to turn sprint by default on, I suggest unbinding it from left shift or from your joystick on controller, and then don't rebind it to anything yet. After a few days or a week, you can then rebind it to whatever you want, but don't bind it right away. The reasoning behind this is once you first switch, you're just going to keep hitting it randomly because you're so used to hitting it. So you don't want to mess up your builds or your gameplay by rebinding it too quickly and just getting frustrated. At this point, if you don't have sprint by default on, you're just not optimizing your gameplay. The only reason I can see people not wanting it on is if they play other games without sprint by default, like Apex Legends, but let's be real, that game's trash. If you mainly play Fortnite and are trying to become the best player you possibly can, you need sprint by default on. Third setting is not a new setting, but is something I've been trying out and thinking about since my last settings video. That setting is tap to search or interact. I kind of dismissed tap to search in my other settings video, but I actually think it can be pretty useful, especially if you play a controller. So the reason being is this tap to search setting allows you to only press your interact key instead of holding it to open a chest or a llama. This is really useful on controller when you think about it. Right now, majority of you guys on controller probably have their interact key on either circle, square, or triangle for PS4, and Y, X, or B for Xbox One. Even if it's not on one of those buttons, the point is that it's likely on a button that requires you to take your finger off your right joystick and press and hold the interact button. With the tap to search setting on, you can just press the button, then put your finger back on your joystick while it's opening up, so you'll be ready to pick up the weapons or to look around or to get ready to shoot if someone's near you. On PC, you look around with your mouse, so tap to search isn't as useful in those situations when you and your enemy are going for the same chest. But a pro for both console and PC is if you have tap to search on, you can drop items and move around stuff in your inventory while you revive a teammate. The only downside to this setting is that you can only stop opening up the chest by moving around if you have it on. That just means you can't bait people as easily if you're 50-50ing for a chest, because if you have tap to interact off, you can just stop holding your interact key to stop opening the chest. If you're on keyboard and mouse, I think it's up to you if you want it on or not. There's some clear advantages like reviving, but then there's just disadvantages like the one I just went over. For controller though, I definitely recommend having it on, as you get two advantages, with one being able to look around and having your thumbs ready on your joystick while opening chests, which in my opinion is pretty huge. Second to last non-graphic setting I'll cover is another setting I kind of dismissed in my other settings video. The setting I'm talking about is auto open doors. I actually played around with it a little bit over the past few days, and I don't think it's as bad as I made it out to be. So what it does is that it will automatically open up doors for you. In order to do this, you have to be pretty much right on top of the door and be pressing W or moving forward with your joystick. You can go next to a door and look at it or peek around it, and it won't open unless you start basically walking through it. For controller, I think this is a setting you should definitely have on for pretty much the same reason why you should have tap to search on. When you go to open a door on controller, you have to take your finger off your joystick again to open it, and then reposition it back after that. So imagine if someone's standing on the other side of the door, it will take you like a solid second or two to realign your shot, which in Fortnite will definitely cost you your life, especially if you're up against a good PC player like in a pop-up cup or the upcoming World Cup. Another benefit for controller and keyboard and mouse is when you mess up and edit late game in scrims. This has happened to me a lot, and I've seen this happen to many pros where you're trying to edit out of your 1x1 with the storm at your back, and you get nervous and accidentally edit a door instead of editing completely out of your wall. By the time you realize this, you're already panicking and you're screwing up your edits even more since you're up against the wall trying to leave. With auto open doors, it doesn't matter if you edit a door, as it will just open up for you and you'll be out. As easy as that. The only downside I see is that it will take a little getting used to, and you technically lose a little control since you're not the person who's opening the door by pressing any buttons. But overall, I think it's definitely something controller players should have on, and for keyboard and mouse players, try it out and decide for yourself. Last note on this is that it only opens up doors automatically, so it won't close them for you. The last non-graphic setting I want to discuss is auto sort by consumables to the right. I'll be quicker with this one because like sort by default, there's no reason that you shouldn't have this enabled. This setting sorts your consumables, which are your meds and shields, all for you by automatically putting them to the far right of your inventory. Whether you're on controller or keyboard and mouse, you probably have your consumables to the right side of your inventory, and if you don't and you're like Hamlins and you have them to the left or like in some random formation, you can just go into your keybinds and rebind your inventory slot 1 to inventory slot 5. Nothing will change except for the order you have them in your inventory when you do this. So if you still don't have this setting enabled, even after me telling you this, you're kind of just putting yourself at a disadvantage for no reason. For now, it only works for consumables, but how amazing would it be if it worked for weapons? Like if you picked up an AR and it would automatically go to your first slot. This could definitely happen in the future, but for now we only have auto sort consumables, so make sure you use it. Now for graphic setting changes. I'm not going to be covering and comparing all of the graphic settings because not all of them change, and that's kind of what my other video was about. Instead, I want to look at the two biggest changes to graphic settings in Season 8, which were shadows and motion blur. I don't think it was mentioned anywhere in the patch notes. Shadows were definitely changed in the new season. I have shadows off, but for some reason parts of the game look like there are shadows on. I'm not sure if it's just me, but it kind of looks like the building that's not facing the sun is darker than the other part that's in the sun. Maybe I'm going crazy, but I don't know. I think they added very slight shadows, or at least tints to the game, where even if you have shadows off like I do, you still see them. But the bigger change was having shadows on in this season compared to last season. Obviously, it's hard to tell when I don't compare them directly, which I will do in a second, but to me, the shadows aren't that bad anymore. It's much darker in these areas, and all the same spots have shadows, but to me, it's not as hard to see people as it was before the season with shadows on. A direct comparison between the two shows a little more of a contrast. It just doesn't seem as dark. You still want shadows off on PC, as that eats up your FPS, but it seems like they adjusted shadows for console players, so they're not at too much of a disadvantage anymore. Let me know if you guys on console notice a change in shadows, as I definitely think there was one. Lastly is a settings option that Epic finally allowed console players to turn off, and that is motion blur. Motion blur might be the worst setting in the game, other than maybe VSync for PC. If you guys build quickly or just move around quickly, with motion blur on, everything becomes blurred out, hence the name motion blur, and it will quickly give you a headache. If you have a PS4 Pro or Xbox One S, you had motion blur enabled by default up until this point, so now you can go into your settings and you should see the option to turn it off, so make sure you go right now and turn it off. Other than these two graphic settings, nothing has really changed. I still recommend having pretty much all low graphic settings except view distance on Epic if your PC is good enough. Altogether though, these changes should cover all the new and updated settings, as well as the settings I went back and tried out again. If this video helped you guys out, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and to turn on post notifications. This video shoutouts are a little longer than usual since you guys have been crazy with the support, but thank you to Oh No It's Trey, Jack, Rami, Clapsies, Taj, Mamba, Careless, Nifty, Tyson, Glemft, which I probably butchered your name, I'm sorry buddy, and Neku, who all use my code in the item shop. I'm still behind on shoutouts, so if I didn't get to you in this video, just know that I will and I haven't forgotten about you. Otherwise, that's it from me, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.